psychic dimension is weakened because some of the aspects that what make psychic dimension strong is not propagated enough. The emphasis is way too on the gross, physical dimension of reality. And this dimension of reality is constantly propagated. So therefore, this tremendous disproportion rises. So we may be very strong technologically, right? Very strong in many, many aspects of how we bend so-called, or seem to bend laws of nature to our liking. But psychically, we're very, very weak as on a whole. It's the power of projection of consciousness. That's what it is. In the case of Kabir and in the case of Ekalavya. In Mahabharata, on the eve of the Bhagavad Gita, on the eve of the Kurukshetra, something happened to the household of the blind king, Dhritarashtra. Came a boy from some province, traveled very, very far, and asked the teacher who was tutoring youngsters of the family, both Pandavas and Kauravas, the brothers and the cousins, to accept him as his disciple. So he asked Drona to be his teacher. And of course, Drona rejected him outright. How dare you even? This is the house of Kshatriya. You come here. He dressed him down. He rejected him in a most unapologetic way. Of course, he bowed, retreated, and never to be seen for a while, until when the competition for the best archer took place and Arjuna won, then the news came that there is someone who is better than Arjuna. Those of you who do. No, not like Arjuna of the 5 Pandavas was the best archer of his time, the most skilled in the art of archery. So the news came that there was someone who shot all arrows into the mouth of a dog. So very quickly they gathered and went and they found it was Ekalavya. And of course there was this procession. Drona, accompanied by the Pandavas, came and they found Ekalavya, who built an effigy of Drona out of clay and worshipped him as a living guru. And through the act of his worship, through the act of his devotion, he summoned up that very subtle force, that energy, where that what was projected outward was received in the form of all that what there to learn. You see? So this example, of course, doesn't end there. It has some other deeper connotations, because once Ekalavya was discovered, he kneeled in front of Drona and asked to name his prize. In the tradition, it's called dakshina. In other words, when the job is completed, Shishya asks, the disciple asks Guru his prize, whatever that may be. Whatever that may be historically and situationally, sometimes will be in terms of livestock, ornaments, whatever, payoff. In this case, Drona demanded the thumb of his right hand so as to disable Ekalavya from the art that he has mastered. And of course, on a very spot, Ekalavya took knife and cut clean his thumb, put it in a white handkerchief, and offered it to Drona. And some say that that marked the end of peace. That what gave as a move towards what would unfold on Kurukshetra. That act. Of course, Drona was moved by necessity to make sure that only Arjuna, as a kshatriya, trained to that art. No boy, no matter how skillful, can live at the very same time who can be better. See the connotations. So he disables his participation in what would become the conflict. Of course, there are esoteric repercussions to that, esoteric dimension, what it represents. But at the face value, it's an example of unlimited power within our own awareness, within the field of our awareness, when we set ourselves on something to achieve the desired goal in terms of acquisition of any skill. In this case, let's say, the skill of archery. Of course, at that level, as a warfare, at another dimension, the Dhanurveda is the part which is in relation to that what the art of archery represents. It's bowing, bending of the bow. It's the art of meditation. Remember also that when the training goes of the 5 brothers, when Drona teaches them all how each brother takes the bow and asking first Yudhishthira, the eldest, the son of Dharma, what do you see? And Yudhishthira goes, I see, there's a, let's say, the goal, right? What do you call it? The target. I see the target. I see the tree. I see the passing bird. I see the cloud. Get out of here. Next one. Like each brother takes turn. What do you see? And everyone just, I see the target. And then comes Arjuna. Arjuna, what do you see? I see the target. What else do you see? Nothing. See? That's the art of meditation. He mastered the art of Dhanurveda. The art of meditation is that. Internal dimension. That's what made him the best archer. So of course, the scripture, as all scriptures, always have to be applicable to 3 levels. 3 levels of reality. The actual level of reality that we consider this the waking, this time and space convention, and the psychic realm, and the transcendental. So all this is covered in the aforementioned scripture, in the Mahabharata. But the example of Ekalavya and Kabir, there's this parallel of being able to summon up that extraordinary level by virtue of total and utter alignment. You see? Which for us modern people seems like a almost unreachable fit. Right? Because it's a very, well, obviously very different time, very different predisposition. we live in time when psychic dimension is weakened greatly. Psychic dimension is weakened because some of the aspects that what make psychic dimension strong is not propagated enough. The emphasis is way too on the gross physical dimension of reality. And this dimension of reality is constantly propagated. So therefore, this tremendous disproportion rises. So we may be very strong technologically, right? Very strong in many, many aspects of how we bend so-called, or seem to bend laws of nature to our liking. But psychically, we're very, very weak as on a whole. This is also why we are literally what I said it tongue-in-cheek, but this is gravity is greatly overrated, right? What I meant by that is that we live as a collective consciousness, of course, by virtue of how it all functions, right? If there are enough people, it's the monkey's effect or whatever you call it, right? Or football fans, right? Effect. Maybe group thing. I don't know what it is. What I do know is that collective consciousness is made of the sum total. And so a field is created. So if enough people believe in something, let's say enough people believe in some balloony thing, then that balloony thing becomes a reality. And that balloony thing becomes a reality one lives. So of course, the ideology, we've seen this throughout history, we see this happening now, right? And so the example I gave this, that some of these feats displayed by, let's say, some of these ancients seem to us so unreachable, is because psychically, in terms of the domain of that subtle, you see, we are weakened as human beings. Only in few little pockets this is perhaps remain intact, kept alive. And this is what's very, very important, is to restore that. Restore that. Because that realm, this realm, it's literally, we can speak about it from so many different points of view, and every tradition had this understanding of the spheres of existence and spheres of influence. Like you take the medieval tradition of these different realms, right? Different heavens, different levels, different stratas, right? And this different stratas is what that, let's say, angelic realm, and even among the angels there were hierarchy of angels, right? So there is a hierarchy of angels. Just in Vedic culture and in Vedic civilization, there is this very concept of beings, right? The beings, right? Very, very rich variety with different powers. And they inhabit worlds, they inhabit realms, these spheres. So everything seems to be okay and fine when everyone remains within their spheres, and occasionally these spheres interact, like the most maybe immediate example is the example when extraordinarily gifted musically people are born with such extraordinary gifts that it is said that they are come from the region of Gandharvas, the celestial beings, which are the guardians of all the rhythms and harmonies. So Gandharvas, right? The Gandharva Ved is a part of Vedic culture, Vedic discipline, which deals with sounds, vibrations, and which is at the root of all Indian classical music. All the ragas is a whole science to that. These vibrations are all linked to the, of course, the movement of the celestial body, of the earth and the sun and the moon, and how the time is measured. So all these ragas are born out of particular frequencies. But anyway, so these different beings, right, the different realms, when some of these realms are not propitiated, when some of these realms are not receiving offerings, they weaken, like it's normal. They can weaken to the degree of being withered, almost like muscles that if they don't work, then become into atrophy. In the same way, in the psychic realm, this is a very complex understanding behind what we worship. See? And with the tremendous emphasis being put on since the Industrial Revolution, on rational understanding of all this, and how we kind of almost, there was this euphoria that we are just about to get to it all, like we're just gonna get, you know, right? What is it like? Einstein purportedly said, like, I just want to know God's thoughts, the rest are details, something like that. Please correct me. Yeah, something, yeah, I just want to get to the mind of God, the rest are details, something like that, right? Like, there was this euphoria that just cracked it all open, totally. And of course, with that emphasis, total emphasis on the progress, that outward progress, which is also, of course, guarded and guided and is an expression of certain forces to be propitiated, right? But if it is at the expense of that subtler dimension of reality, then tremendous disharmony is there and then. Because certain areas lapse. You see that it's just within the human being, because it begins at that level. It's at the level of the human being. That whole cosmic strata, as it were, there is no longer that coherence. There is no longer every sphere acts in accord with its inborn assignment. So for the rational mind, for particularly this, let's say, phase, I don't want to give it exact time, you can do it yourself, from when to when, it was all dismissed. Just like Brits dismissed the whole Indian heritage on the grounds of it being inferior. I mean, it's just outlived. Just as pagan knowledge in Western Hemisphere was dismissed in favor of organized, unified, purportedly religion, right? All this, let's say, centuries, millennia practices of the Druids, for example, which, very close to Shinto, right? Where every laws of nature expresses itself and everything is holy and everything is alive and throbbing with various possibilities. And, like the well and the tree and the rock. It's not just the well and the rock and the tree, just bare elements to quench your thirst and to do your stuff. And it's all this dead matter. No, all is alive. Everything is filled with spirits. And the spirits are in that rock, in that well, in that tree, in that fox. And this correlation and living with them, everyone has to receive an offering. Because if someone goes starving, they will either start to attack others or leave. So chaos begins to reign. So you see, we have simultaneously, on one hand, arrived at, on one hand, this bulldozer-like propensity with that industrialized kind of approach to everything, right? Rational approach, industrialized, and science now in service of how to make life better, comfortable, richer, more. And at the same time, the richness of esoteric dimension is now reduced to so-called monism of these big religions, which kind of sanitized, bleached out, like it's like pouring this deadly stuff into the psychic domain to bleach it off of all its richness in the name of some God who lives in heaven, right? And all of us are making of course I'm painting a drastic picture. I'm a painter, right? So forgive me, like if some sensibilities are being infringed here. I'm perfectly willing to acknowledge, as I always said, yes, of course, Shakti always moves, right? And arts, that's where it has to find its way. Okay, I can't be here, I can't be here. Okay, I'm allowed to be here. I'll be here. I'll be in the chants. I'll be in architecture. I'll be in Notre Dame, right? I'll be in those cathedrals that are built, that truly still resonate, that like music, but not anymore in the domain where it moves the spirit, because fear instead begins to prevail, right? Like the relationship to God based on fear, like judgment, all that. Whatever is not worshipped goes hungry, not receives. And sooner or later, just like already at the end of the 19th century, Friedrich Hölderlin, this German romantic poet, who was a subject of fascination of Martin Heidegger, who believed, the German philosopher believed that Hölderlin, as a poet, had access to being, which was the main argument posed by Martin Heidegger in his expositions, that philosophy departed from the main question. The whole philosophy became too narrow, focused on certain aspects, whereas the main question, the question of being, somehow is lost out of view. And he, of course, went his own way, to pre-Socratics, drawing from that, bouncing off Nietzsche, who's also had this very, very same interests, and to trace it all before that, what effectively is Neoplatonism, right? Again, crash course in comparative religions and philosophy will make it very, very clear how just very few major ideological systems dominate the world's mind and how that expresses itself, see? So it's all traceable down to the Greeks, in a way. The whole course of Western thought, even the fact that we chose liberal democracy as a flag, is not a coincidence, it's all traceable here. The Judeo-Christian ideas of equality, all this is Karl Marx manifesto, all connected, all connected. So this poet, this line, the Friedrich Hölderlin, he laments in one of his poems, no longer worshipped, they have departed, leaving our atmosphere bereft. no longer answering to prayers because they went starving from that what was offered to them and sung to them for hundreds and hundreds of years. No flowers, no couplets, no verses. See? So that's what we are, right? Calling the moon mission Apollo and writing it on a thingy, right? Thingy, the shuttle, right? Whatever. Doesn't mean someone worships Apollo or Dionysius there. No, it's a peculiar thing there. So this is where we are. We find ourselves now, if it is true, at the time when all this has to regrouped itself, you see? And take it or leave it, I believe that that's what David Bohm have suggested after being heavily influenced by Jiddu Krishnamurti in various of his conversations when he came with this idea of implicate order. How the change in society is similar to how the droplets of individual droplets of water on a leaf, right? They begin to amalgamate, right? And then enough for them to roll down and another leaf, and it creates a stream. So that implicate order, it's where this nucleus, seemingly independent nucleus, arise. And it's out of this nucleus that shift can happen into qualitatively new way of life. Not by creating United Nations, sitting down at a long round table and discussing things and thinking things and so of course, but imagine if someone at the conference somewhere, the symposium, will suggest, the reason why we all messed up because we really don't chant enough, don't offer enough, don't really invoke enough, right? You forgot your pill today, sir. You overstressed. Don't worry, we have here. There's a spa there. We tranquilizers also available. Like you have temperature. I mean, tongue in cheek, of course, I'm saying, but it is extraordinary. But the shift that, let's say, whatever it's called, right, is happening. We are living that shift. It is there. The collapse of values that were consistently imposed to create a shared consensus is now in deep crisis. So all secret services, all of them are regathering, regrouping, what to do. How can we do this? How can this be put back into control? Because the genie seems to be leaked out of the bottle. See? Because this is where that what I suggested in Mexico, was it last year or 2 years ago? When was that? War and Peace was born as a discourse, right? War and Peace with Leo Tolstoy. Why all epics have war in them. Why epics have that accompaniment. Why there is this suddenly at some point, eventually, it's like why Ramayana culminates in the siege of Lanka. Why Mahabharata has the Bhagavad Gita and the Kurukshetra. And it is not without just, it's not just, it's the reality of the situation. So that reality of the situation is what we're witnessing and facing now. So this very same where we have started, right? Vishnu is there on the Shesha, and having a blissed out, not totally in that, completely probably Jagadananda, but all these aspects like, and then Vishnu, Vishnu, Vishnu. It's like an alarm clock, see? And Vishnu, like, he knows this is no way. They're not going to get off his back. He has to do it. So that aspect reincarnates, as it were, to restore the Dharma. So, and that, of course, is this very, very refined, complex cosmology here, right? How can that principle can restore? But when coming into the world, he can't just walk around like this, like in the movies, right? He's, after all, the supreme, one of the Trinity. Only Maheshwara is the, has a bit more of that in his pinky. But he doesn't do that. He has to still go and fight Ravana, right? And at some point, Hanuman needs to bring a whole mountain to bring the right herb, to revive him. This is not for nothing. This is like, if he was like all omnipotent, very all-powerful, why can't he just like, No. He couldn't even leap. Hanuman had to do the job. Yeah. His brother Lakshman was the incarnation of Shiva and apparently more powerful than Rama. But nobody knew that. Because he fought Indrajit, the son of Ravana, who was by far more powerful than his father. Who knows this in Ramayana? You read Ramayana, you remember this, right? It's extraordinary revelation. We thought Rama is the one. No, but he is the protagonist, he's the main character in the story, in the lore. You see? Vishnu would not get off Shesha's back just by himself. Whenever he is awakened from his slumber, he says, all right, I will, but all others must come too. This is the deal. So all aspects now, the highest aspects of reality are incarnate at the very same time. But once they incarnate, nobody knows who is who in the story. You see? This is where the cliffhanger, this is where it makes it thrilling. This is where you only know your role. You know your role. But you don't know relation. You don't know how we related. Rama didn't know his Vishnu. He had no clue. Only Krishna was given that, allowed that. Buddha did not know either. Why would he have to go through such extremes?